Hey everybody, and welcome back to the internet. So I know a lot of you guys seem to have been enjoying these stories about the Crazypants neighbor, and thanks to Rooroolaboo for posting all these stories. I've gone through and tracked down all of the ones she's posted about this neighbor. So let's go back to the beginning, starting with, "Sell my son your land or I will call the police." So my next door neighbor was a terrible busybody who felt it was her God-given right to tell everyone in our street what they could and couldn't do, from where they parked cars to what flowers they could grow. She had to know everyone's business and would harass people until she got answers, even going as far as stalking. If she didn't get her own way, she would spread the most evil gossip. Her adult children, a son and a daughter, were both greedy and deeply entitled, believing that because the majority of the street were either social housing or rented properties, they were better than everyone else, and if they didn't get what they wanted, then Mother would sort it out. I have many stories about this neighbor, far worse than this, but I will start off with this one as it is the mildest thing she has done and fits into the Entitled Parents subreddit better. So the son owns two other properties near the end of the street, which he rents out. At the very end of the same street is another house with a plot of land right next to it. The owners of that house and land built a garage that they used for work, rebuilding old cars and bikes. The business is at least 30 years old, handed down from father to son. It's very small, so they can only work on one vehicle at a time, but due to the owner's skills in restoration, they are always in high demand. So one day about 10 years ago, the son rocks up in his latest BMW and walks up to the owner, a father and his teenage son. The rest of this conversation is paraphrased, as I was not a witness, but this was told to my family by the owners themselves. So the son goes up and says, "Hey guys, it's your lucky day. I want to buy your land. I'll give you 15,000 pounds. Notice that he didn't ask if it was for sale or offer to negotiate a fair price. The guy says, no, sorry. The business is not for sale. Thanks for the interest though." He says, "I wasn't asking for your business. You could set up somewhere else. I want this land. It's just the right size to build another house on." Says, "Well, sorry, no. This is our livelihood. We can't just move. We would lose business while looking for someplace else, and besides, it used to be my father's garage, and it's next door to our home, so why would we want to sell it? So you can make money. But we make money working here, so sorry, it's not for sale." The son then does what you would expect a grown man of 30, yes, 30, to do. He complained to his mother. His mother takes no time at all and walks back to the garage. "Why won't you sell your garage to my son? He wants to build a house here." "Because this is our place of business and we don't want to sell." "You shouldn't even be working here. It's dangerous." "I can assure you, ma'am, everything is up to code and we have every right to work here. Now please leave us alone." "What are you hiding in there? Is it drugs?" "What? No, we're fixing up an old bike." "I knew it. You were working here illegally. Sell your land to my son or I will contact the authorities." The owner laughed and told her to go ahead. She stormed off and then they thought it was over. Just the nutty ravings of a mad granny, right? An hour later, sure enough, the police arrive. Apparently an anonymous caller rang them to say that the owners had been dealing drugs out of the garage. It was obvious who called them. Of course, all the neighbors had seen the police arrive. Our street is normally quiet, and we're all nosy people, so when you see a blue flashing light, you step out and watch the show unfold. The entitled mom took great glee in telling everyone standing around and watching the chaos how the owners had been selling drugs to children, and how she wasn't the one who called them, but everyone knows what's going on, and thank goodness something is finally being done about it. Half of the neighbors were shocked at this event, but a few of the longer-term residents were already giving her the side-eye, like it was a special offer at Tesco or Walmart. She must have been feeling pretty smug with herself, only there was a snag, just a little one. Because the tiny garage worked on rare and old cars, which can be expensive, the owners had CCTV. That was something entitled mom had not counted on. After the police had shown up, the owners knew who the culprit was and had no issue with showing footage, complete with sound to the officers, showing entitled mom threatening to call the police if they didn't sell the land. With half the neighbors out and watching the events unfold, the entitled mom's face switches from smugness to fear as the police walk away from the garage and approach her instead. The officer then asked if they could step into her home to discuss something she probably did not want her neighbors to hear. She receives a warning regarding harassment and wasting police time. The owners of the garage were never bothered again, and the last remaining neighbors who didn't know how bad she was finally saw her for the witch she was. Sorry the ending wasn't epic, but that's just how it was. CCTV comes in to save the day. If you guys want to hear about some other stories about CCTV, go ahead and watch my last night's video where I talk all about creepy stuff people have seen on security cameras. And on to the next story. So this one was posted about a week later, called "Harassed Over a Parking Spot." So some of you have been asking for more stories about my crazy neighbor and her adult kids. So a reminder, my next door neighbor, who my friends and I call Crazypants, was a very nosy, very entitled woman who tried to tell everyone who lived in the same street what they could and couldn't do. Her adult children were equally spoiled. My neighbor on the other side of me, we'll call her Gina. Gina is a mother of 3 who works in a local supermarket. She's the sort of person who, if you tripped her up, she would apologize to your foot. One day, her husband John got a new job which came with a company car. Nothing special. It was covered in logos for the company, but it meant that Gina could use the family car whenever she needed to. Some of the houses where I live have a driveway and some don't. Gina has a drive, but it only takes 1 car. As they were a liability for a company car, that took up the space in the driveway, and her car would be parked either in front of my house or Crazypants, as neither of us had driveways. It's a public road, so anyone can park anywhere as long as they don't block a drive. One day, entitled daughter bangs on Gina's door. Apparently she was annoyed that Gina had been parking in front of her mother's house. That space, as she saw it, was for her when she visited, and because Gina was in that space, the entitled daughter had to park in front of my house and walk a whole 5 feet to her mom's house. Oh, the humanity. This was when Gina made the following mistake. She says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but isn't OP's house right next door? I'm sure you don't have to walk far." She says, "How dare you? That is my parking spot. Why do you have 2 cars anyway? You're just a stupid checkout girl." It was at this point John overheard and demanded that the entitled daughter leave. So she does what a grown woman of 40 always does. She whines to her mother. "Wah, Mummy." That was when Crazypants went into overdrive. Over 6 months, whenever Gina and her family stepped out into the garden, Crazypants would come out and shout at the children for being too loud, or at Gina for wearing revealing clothes. She wears bikinis in the summer, which being in the UK lasts about 31 minutes. She would also turn up to the supermarket Gina worked at and hovered around giving her death stares. Social services were called and told that Gina and John had been putting out cigarettes on the children. The RSPCA were called and told that Gina had been starving her cat. She didn't even have a pet at that time. Also, every time her car parked in front of Crazypants' house, she would bang on the door screaming about her parking space. Poor Gina tried everything. She recorded the abuse and called the police and the council, but they were only willing to give a warning. Her work could not remove Crazypants as long as she wasn't doing anything, and she could not prove who called social services and the RSPCA. In an effort to help, as we were between the 2 neighbors, my dad, yeah, I live with my dad because I'm his carer, decides to let our hedge grow to block Crazypants' view of Gina's garden, so she could have peace. It worked for a while. Then one day we get a knock on the door. Our house is council-owned, so all necessary maintenance work is carried out by them. A man from the council was stood there and let us know that the new fence would be up by 4 p.m. The next thing we heard was the sound of a hedge trimmer. My dad stormed out and demanded to know what was happening. Apparently, we had called the council regarding the very slightly wind-damaged fence between our garden and Crazypants, and have agreed to have it replaced. We didn't call anyone. In order to put the new fence in, the hedge we had needed to be removed. There was nothing we could do. We made it clear no one had called anyone, but because the fence was damaged, they decided to continue and there was nothing we could do. Lo and behold, the next day Crazypants was leaning over the fence and was back to shouting at the children. I would love to say that Crazypants got what she deserved, but Gina eventually cracked and sold her car. She then paid £600 for a new fence. After she got rid of the car, the harassment stopped as quickly as it started. Gina is fine now. She now has a management position and a new dog who likes to play with mine. So next time, the one where Crazypants demands to know what I'm doing at 2 a.m. in my own home. Hey, and that brings us to the story I put up a week ago. But I'm going to read it again anyway, so if you don't want to hear it again, you can just skip ahead. So this one's called, Entitled Parent Wants to Know What I'm Doing in My Own Home, then demands I stop so I can do errands for her in the morning. So another story about Crazypants. This one isn't very good, I'm afraid. The next one will be better. So a little background for this. Years ago, I moved back home to help my mom look after my dad as she was struggling. My dad has multiple conditions, angina, diabetes, and arthritis amongst them. Then sadly, my mom passed away, so Dad was completely on his own. My dad could fill a subreddit all on his own with stories, as he has a foul mouth and is known for being a complete jerk to people who annoy him. You'll see this later. But he can't get around like he used to, and relies on me to keep him out of trouble and keep things ticking. Thankfully, because my job is from home, I can look after him. Now, sometimes the people I work for are based in other countries, so when I talk to them online, it can be late at night or early in the morning because of time difference. Crazypants' children do not live with her. The daughter does not work, while the son owns some of the property near us and rents it out. They are very well off, having both married into money. Meanwhile, I don't get a lot of free time because I work. I'm a carer for the grumpiest, yet somehow lovable git on the planet, and I have my own chronic illness on top. Now to the main story. I had just been talking with a client. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was downstairs. The living room light, of course, was on because I'm not an owl. I was typing up something when there was a banging on the door. I was worried, as we had in the past had drunks at the door, mistaking our house for some friend's place, and you never know what they may do. I open it carefully, and there's Crazypants. You can guess the key here. She says, "Excuse me, why are you awake?" I say, "Sorry?" She says, "I want to know why you are awake." I say, did we wake you or something?" No noise had been made, and there was no way she could have seen our light on without leaving the house. In fact, she would often step out and do late-night inspections of the street like she was looking for contraband. She says, "I don't think you should be up this late. Why are you up?" I say, "I don't think it's any of your business, but since you asked so sweetly, I'm working." She says, "But it's 2 a.m. I say, "And it's my home. Are we now just pointing out random facts? Because this game is boring me." She says, "You should be asleep." I say, "And yet here you are, wide awake. Isn't it a miracle? We should form a club." She says, "I'm supposed to be going to the hairdresser's at 10 a.m., and I don't want you too tired." Now this has me super confused, and I don't know how to respond for a few moments. I say, "Excuse me? What does your hair appointment have to do with me?" She says, "Well, I was going to get you to drive me to it. My kids have important things to do, and you already do a lot for that very rude man. The very least you can do as a neighbor is give me a lift." I say, "What the? Are you completely off your rocker?" She says, "What's the problem? You do stuff for your father all the time." I would also like to point out that I don't drive, let alone own a car, and even if I was up for letting you sit on the handlebars of my bike, why would I be taking you to the hairdresser's? You have a daughter and a son with multiple fancy cars. Get one of them to take you, or get a taxi and stop bothering me over what I do in my own home. She says, "But they work. I can't bother them. You're home all day." I say, "I work from home, like I was doing before you banged on the door. Now please go away." It was at that point I discovered my dad had been woken up and was now leaning out of the bedroom window listening to the whole thing. He says, "Crazypants, why don't you mind your own frickin' business and piss off?" Crazypants scurries away upon the sight of Grumpy Dad's man nipples, and I go back inside. The next day, the daughter arrived to take the mother dearest to the hairdresser's. I was coming out to walk the dog and got death stares from them both. It was at this point my dad opened the living room window and shouted at Crazypants, "And get your frickin' mustache waxed!" Thanks for making it less awkward, Dad. The next story is when entitled daughter and Crazypants try to con the council to pay for the entitled daughter's BMW and get an innocent man fired. And here we are with entitled mom and entitled daughter try to con the council for a new BMW. So to enter my street, there's only one way in. The other end is a primary school and a small roundabout so people can get back out again. We get our rubbish collected every week, and the guys who do it are really nice. They go out of their way to help everyone if they struggle with sorting, recycling, and even putting the bins back for us so we don't have to drag down the steps to bring them back. Our council is crazy strict about recycling, so it's great to have these guys helping out. One day there's a commotion outside. Remember how I said in my very first story about how quiet it is here and we are all nosy people? Well, naturally, we all come out to watch the show. Entitled daughter is with Crazypants, and they're jumping up and down shouting at some poor guy. From what we could gather, this is apparently what happened. Entitled daughter was claiming that she was driving into our street. The rubbish men were coming out of the lorry, and the driver dented her BMW and didn't notice. Sure enough, there was a massive dent on the left-hand side from the driver's perspective. Remember this part. Instead of confronting the bin men there and then, they had called the council, and a timid little man with glasses was now stood there being screamed at. Now I didn't hear everything. Most of this was pieced together from recounts of my other neighbors. She says, "Look at my car. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to repair the damage?" "I'm so sorry about this. Obviously, we are more than willing to pay for any repairs. My supervisor has authorized me to write you a check for £1,000 to cover the repairs as a gesture of goodwill." Crazypants says, "Not good enough. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to fire that driver, and you are going to have to replace my daughter's car." She says, "I'm sorry, but we can't replace a BMW. It's perfectly fixable." She says, "Do you know who I am? You will replace this car. It's now been made a death trap." They argued back and forth with the entitled daughter and Crazypants screaming at this poor man, who ended up on the phone to his supervisor, who said they could offer them $1,500. The guy offered them this amount, and entitled daughter said that she would consider £3,000 as long as the driver was fired. Then their greed bit them in the butt. One of the neighbors watching tapped the guy on the shoulder and asks, "Shouldn't the dent be on the other side?" You could see the man's face as it dawned on him how impossible their story was. Yep, if the daughter had entered the only way into our street, the right-hand side of the car would have been facing the lorry, not the left. Not that it mattered that there was only one way in, because in the UK we drive on the left-hand side. Not only had she damaged her car some other way, but she and Crazypants were demanding a new car to be paid for by the taxpayer, and for the council to get an innocent man fired. The guy put away his phone, got in his car, and drove away with entitled daughter and Crazypants open-mouthed. They were the butt of all the jokes for at least 2 months. And as an added bonus, the bin men were suddenly less forgiving over Crazypants' recycling mistakes and refused to take any of her rubbish until it was done correctly. Next time we hear about Crazypants lets herself into my house, featuring Grumpy Dad. These stories are pretty fun. Now to the final story of the day, which is the one I read just 2 days ago, called Entitled Parent Lets Herself Into My Home. So Crazypants used to work in local government before she retired. This is probably where she developed her sense of entitlement from. She felt she could tell everyone what color to paint their homes and even what flowers to plant. If she didn't approve, she would tell you that you couldn't do it. This is where my late mom comes in. My mom was a tenants rep, an elected volunteer person who represents people in social housing. She was one of the best and fought hard for people to have the right to live in a safe, clean, and affordable social housing. Because of this, people would come to her asking if things Crazypants would say about their hedges being too tall or not being able to keep chickens in the garden were true. And my mom would always let them know what Crazypants was saying was a lie. Because of this, Crazypants felt really bitter towards my mom and hated the fact she was so well loved. Then after I came home, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She became extremely ill and I was in and out of the hospital constantly for 8 months. Instead of showing compassion, Crazypants set about telling people my mom had a drinking problem and her liver was failing. Because of this, we completely refused to talk to her ever again, and our neighbors refused to discuss my mom with her. It drove Crazypants mad that she couldn't find out what was going on. Crazypants had to know everything. She would listen at her window if we were outside talking. She would ask neighbors about us, who would told her to shove off, but the biggest insult was she would open our mail. In the UK, if you are out when the postie arrives and they can't get to the mail in the letterbox, it's common for them to take it to the next door and leave you a slip saying so. I was receiving packages for work stuff and also ordering mobility aids so Mom could get about better. A lot of the time we were at the hospital, so Crazypants would take them. We noticed when we finally got them that the tape had been taken off and replaced quite often. She had also gotten into the habit of trying to stop the postie and to get our letters for us. This behavior carried on even after my mom had sadly passed. I have no idea why she continued. Perhaps she thought we were hiding something from her, so in an attempt to stop her, I went onto the post office website and found that I could register a safe space or a neighbor to leave the mail with and asked them not to give her our mail anymore. This drove her nuts. The postmen and women refused point blank to hand anything over to her. She no longer had access to our privacy. Then came December. During this time, there were a lot of temporary staff, and this guy clearly didn't know that Crazypants was out of bounds. So while I was out with the dog, my dad wasn't feeling too good, so he went to bed for a nap and slept through the knocking of Tempy McTemperson. Crazypants shoots out and offers to take the package. Sure enough, he hands it over and posts a slip through the letterbox telling us where it was. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that she opened this parcel too and that was the end. Nope. Read the title again. Grumpy Dad hears noises coming from downstairs and thinks I have come home. He comes downstairs and sees a big parcel on the table and goes to the kitchen to offer me a cup of tea. Instead of seeing me, he sees Crazypants going through our kitchen cupboards and clutching in her hand a couple of our bills from the drawer. He says, "What the F are you doing?" He says, "Oh, hello, I brought around your parcel." He says, "Why are you in my kitchen?" She says, "Oh, I just thought, as it is December, that the parcel might be an important present for Rooroolaboo. I thought you might need it quickly, so I checked your front door and then your back, and the back was unlocked, so better to have it indoors in case it rains." "And then you decide to make a snack and amuse yourself by reading my water bill? What the effing F-biscuits are you on, you cockwomble?" She drops everything and suddenly starts behaving confused. "Oh, where am I? This isn't my kitchen. I don't know where I am." Then my dad, with the rage of 1,000 suns and grabbing the wok, "Get out!" She runs for it and my dad calls me, telling me to get my butt back home. After calming him down and convincing him not to go and kick her door down, I contacted the police, who were not at all helpful. Crazypants basically gives them the confused old lady routine, telling them she mistook our house for hers, and that was that. She got another caution, and I started locking the doors even when someone was home. I would love to say that she stayed away from then, but years later, in another incident, she received a letter. She had been reported for antisocial behavior by someone and decided it was us. I found her in our garden with a screwdriver. She pulled her confused act and I walked back to her house. Our neighbor, Gina's kid, then informed us that she saw Crazypants using it on the back door like a crappy crowbar. Yeah. I could post forever about Crazypants, but I think I will leave it at this because it's so surreal for me sharing this amount of crazy, and I don't think a lot of the stories fit here in Entitled Parents anyway. I hope everyone out there who has to deal with idiotic and selfish human beings know that you are amazing people who deserve good things and maybe even a puppy. Thanks for putting up with my insane posts and my online social awkwardness that is in hyperdrive now. Oh, and to the person who compared my dad to Danny DeVito, I told him this and his exact words were, Yeah, I'll just let you read that part, which I think is French for thank you. Well, Rooroolaboo, thanks for posting all these great stories. I noticed you commented on my video the other day, so I guess I have your go-ahead to be making this video at least. I hope you don't mind probably being asked a bunch of questions in this comment section, so thanks for the stories and thanks to everybody who watched. So I will talk to you guys next time.